after finally having played some Pillars of Eternity 2, I can now properly do an exposition on my opinions of what the problems of Pillars of Eternity 2 were and how my fears have been confirmed by actually experiencing it firsthand. Not that it was very difficult, I already laid that out for you. Well, let's go over what I did in my previous video, which was looking at the premise and determining the problems there. So there are four major problems or four things that Pillars of Eternity 2 had to do. And that was talk about the Godzilla going through a place and destroying a place. 2, telling the story of the aftermath of that. 3, the hero character chasing down Godzilla and confronting him. And 4, the hero character getting other help and then gathering people to figure out how to stop this thing. So those four things have to happen in the story in some capacity, or lampshaded in some capacity. So how do you get around those problems of chasing a Colossus down? Well, in Pillars of Eternity 2, they give you a ship. And then they give you the option or the capacity to be telepathic with other gods as well as Godzilla, and to do so in dreamscapes as well. So what that means is that you're using fantasy tropes to lampshade other fantasy tropes to solve those problems, and that's fine. And that's, I would say, it's a fair to satisfactory way of doing it, but it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it solves the problem, or it doesn't mean it's worthwhile. Now, this could have been a tighter story about chasing a giant down instead of this gigantic pirate island adventure. And then there's the theme that they throw in there, which is throughout the entire story, which is the concept of colonialism versus tribalism and all this other stuff that goes in between that. It's just this big, bloated ball of pointlessness. Now, again, I compare this to other real-time with pause games, which did it well, at least in my opinion, which is Tyranny and Planescape Torment. So in Tyranny, you're the legal power in the world, or you're an agent of the legal power. And your job is to go around and judge people. You are the lawbringer. You're like the sheriff. So it's your job to explore the levels of war-torn fantasy environment in a real-time with pause setting gameplay. And you solve disputes. The theme being the law. And you are enacting that law. That makes you give a reason to the player to explore and solve problems, to meet with people and figure out what's going on and enact justice in whatever way you see fit. Now in Planescape Torment, you're an immortal, forgetful zombie who can't die, comes back to life. Those are some big hurdles to solve in the fantasy storytelling genre. But this game was made with a subversive form of storytelling. That was kind of the point. So you have all these RPG tropes of various kinds, and then they're turned on their head. And they're given a new spin. That's kind of the point of the game. So nearly everywhere you go, you pick up a memory, you pick up an item, some person recognizes you from a past life, and you learn just a little bit more about who and what you were, the environment that you were in. This makes you want to explore. This gives you a reason. This matches the theme of redemption. You want to right your wrongs if you so choose. You want to explore and help others. You could have an evil playthrough, but it's pretty much biased towards redemption, to doing the right thing. Now you could also hurt people in the process, but still in doing so, you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn about what you did previously or what your previous incarnations were. So exploration is inherently tied into discovery in both Tyranny and Planescape Torment, and that's how that should work. In Pillars of Eternity 2, there's no real reason to explore the environment. There's no need to go through a gigantic city with 5 different districts or the entire ocean and all its islands, because the story is to stop a giant. There's very few plot points that I remember that's, oh, we have to go talk to Bob in order to get to the giant. It's like, no, just go. So why are we helping tribes on an island? Why are we helping the trading companies with those tribes? Why are we helping ghosts or talking to souls or spiritual technological researchers? I mean, this has nothing to do with stopping, or at least trying to figure out what Godzilla is doing. So it's more to do with Obsidian trying to be Neil Gaiman and failing very hard. I mean, if you're going to steal ideas, go for the master, I agree, but you got to figure out how to do it right. Now, I'm still going through the game, so let me actually talk about the good things about the game. And it is a very good game. It is a high production value game. One of the number one things I love in gaming is voice acting. It's kind of the main games I cover on this channel. So they have almost, I'd say 95% of the dialogue in the game is voice acted, and that's even by NPCs, which is amazing. I mean, it's a huge game, and they managed to do that, so that's pretty cool. The companions you get, they have a lot to say, not too much, but they have a lot to say, and they not only can have relationships with the main character, they can get into companion relationships, which is kind of cool. I've never seen that before done at that level. It's kind of like the level of dialogue from, let's say, Dragon Age 2 companions, done in a more, I'd say, more sophisticated way. So the writing itself, the content isn't bad. That's always a good thing. Then, of course, there's the music. Music is one of those misused or misunderstood aspects of production. And the music reminded me of Suikoden series, the Suikoden 4 specifically, which is a kind of a pirate adventure already. There's some really beautiful pieces in here, and these make you want to explore the cities more. There's some sad themes in there. Just by going into a level, you feel this nostalgic, sad piece of the slums or religious place. And it gives you that feeling of a fantasy, medieval, European, colonial, tribal world. And you combine that with some really interesting sounds I couldn't quite describe of the wild, the wilderness, the ocean. It has a nice quality to it. So combine that with the voice acting and you got a really fantastic audio experience. And then there's the gameplay. Now the combat for Real Time with Pause is really next level. If you like the Real Time with Pause genre, or at least that style of gameplay, they put a hell of a lot of work and depth to the strategy, the tactics, the items as usual, and you're just going to love playing it. It almost solves one of the major problems of Real Time with Pause, which is the clumping problem that I've always had, where everyone just goes straight into an enemy and they sort of step over each other. Well, in this case, they sort of fall into each other and they push the person next to it to the left or the right, so everyone sort of gets daisy chained. It's kind of funny, like magnets. So if one magnet pops into another one, they push apart and they just lock into each other. So you have like this ring of people around if they're all melee range. It doesn't solve the problem, but it comes very close, and I really liked challenging an enemy and just boom, off it goes. And as soon as you get into encounter, the whole game pauses, and that's great. So you don't have to worry about missing time. There's also stages to your character and leveling so that you can unlock passive and active abilities, and everyone has their own way of solving problems with in RPGs previously where you had to sleep every time to get your spells back. Well, now they've solved that problem, and some spells or some people's abilities are based on damage or number of hits you can do. That was in the previous game with some of the classes, but now it's just better. It works better. It works faster. It's less annoying. Then there's the biggest system, which I noticed was the subclass and the multi-class systems. These are very cool. I think this is a good way to take the D&D style classes and upgrade it. Lots of depth here. So these are all fantastic reasons to buy the game and try, or maybe just rent alone on the game as a game, not as a story, okay? Now let's talk about the negative aspects, and this is not just related to story, but mostly story. So the first one, and this is just a general observation, more is not necessarily better. Now, in the Real Time with Pause game or gameplay, traditionally where you have levels which are very large, in a town you have lots of houses and buildings, what have you, there's lots to explore. You're going to have to make a lot of content on that level. Well, that's normal. But if it's not related to the main thrust of the story, you're giving me a lot of speed bumps, and it's just slowing the game down. And the worst thing about Pillars of Eternity 2 is there's so much content that's completely unrelated. It is the most bloated game or style of game, real-time with pause I've ever seen. Now, you could argue that the quasi-pirate adventure, which is a major theme of the story, which the Watcher, the main character, never really embraces, is completely unnecessary. You could say that. Because, yeah, you need a ship to chase Godzilla, but you shouldn't really be running around trying to solve everyone's problem just because you have a ship. The whole world has nothing to do with you. Now, they try to make it in saying that there are large magical stone deposits throughout the islands, and that's true. There are. So, and that's kind of what the god is after. But for some reason, Godzilla never goes to those places. So why are we going there? Just because they're there. As well as they don't help you in trying to stop Godzilla. So if the Godzilla never went there, and me going there doesn't help me stop Godzilla, why am I going there? So there's really no point to all this bloated stuff that makes it look like it should be related, even though it really isn't. Point number 2 is a big one, and it's the Watcher or the protagonist himself or herself. You just don't need them. There's no reason this dude, aside from some really pathetic version of revenge, there's no reason for this. The gods just choose you and bring you back to life to find out what the giant Colossus thing is doing. That's it. That's why you're here. The other gods are like, hey, what did Bob do? I don't know, he took off. Well, I guess we should get one of those little ants on the ground to find that out for us. And because you're a Watcher, there's really no reason that I can see the Watcher ability to read souls and whatever is useful in this quest. What happens is the Godzilla character borrows part of your soul, and you're like, okay, I got to get my soul back. Okay, great. But why does he have part of your soul? What's the point? You know, he is a god. He can do whatever the hell he wants. And one of the subversive parts of that is he can telepathically talk to you however he likes, as can the other gods. So that's sort of like this, again, that major trope that solves how do you communicate to this thing. Oh, he just talks to you. He just does it. He's a god. So being able to see ghosts and talk to them, which is the whole point of the Watcher, is completely immaterial to the task of stopping Godzilla. Now, of course, we should expect that because in the first game it was almost completely immaterial with all this random past lives bullshit that had nothing to do with anything. So Godzilla, or your god person who has your soul, has no problem not only talking to you whenever you get around to it, because after a plot point he'll decide to talk to you, but after a certain plot point, he even saves you and your team's life and your ship. I don't know why, even though he's like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. Let me help you out there. It's like, what is going on in this story when the bad guy is actively being nice and helping the protagonist? I don't get it. Now we get to talk about number 3, the characters or the companions. And this is kind of sad because the only character that I think has any relevance to the story, at least in a off to the side sort of way, is a stretch goal character called Zodi. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And she is a religious sect of Godzilla, and she thinks she's doing Godzilla's work, and she's like a harbinger of souls. She collects them, and she actually does a better job of this than you do. Even though you can technically collect souls and you can see them, she can't see them. So she's probably a better protagonist because she is a less effective. She's a inferior version of you, and it's kind of like her mission. And interestingly enough, Ider, who is completely useless in the story, is like a foil to Zodi. Because Ider used to be a believer in Godzilla, now he hates Godzilla. Zodi's like full on, I love Godzilla. I'm going to go chase him, and it's my god come real form, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, Zodi, you should probably be in charge of everyone here, because you're the one with all the ambition and the urge to see your god, and and the Watcher's like, I just want my soul back. It's kind of funny. So all the other characters, like Aloth, he's totally useless. Palagina, she's kind of related to the colonialism theme, but again, that's secondary, and she's totally useless to the plot. There's Maya, who's also related to the colonialism theme and kind of the pirate theme, but again, totally useless to the plot. There's Surfin. I think he's part of the pirate theme, but I never really used him. He's totally useless. And then there's this guy called Tekehu. He's kind of like Sirin from Tyranny, but again, totally useless. All these characters are totally useless. They're completely optional as far as I can tell. I don't know why they think. They even had a very cool scene, a Suikoden 2 scene, where you get to choose between Palagina and Maya, and you could choose either or, both or neither, which I thought was like, this reminds me of something. And then we have a very strange addition to the game called Sidekicks. Now, at first I thought it was like the entourage system from Suikoden, where they're just in the backup, like they do some passive thing for you, or maybe they're like an animal companion to rangers, but they're actual characters. But no, they're just NPCs. They're not actual characters. They're not even half characters. They're just like they're NPCs that can go in combat with you. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Characters or side characters, supporting cast members, they have to be versions or slivers of the protagonist or antagonist, or you don't even bother with them. That's why I say that all the other characters, aside from Zodi, are totally useless, and they're not even plot related. And you can, from that, you can totally grasp the Icewind Dale vibe. That's what this is. This is a high production value of Icewind Dale. Like, there are other versions of characters that you don't have to buy. They have some voice sets, and that's about it. I mean, you could buy NPCs from the bar, and you can customize them any way you like. So that's what these sidekicks are. You find them on there's 4 of them. You can find them on quest lines. I've only picked up 2, but the 2 that I picked up, they literally were bored with their lives. I'm like, well, why don't you come with me? And it's like, well, why don't I? And it's like, that's great reasoning. Thank you, game, making me have these useless characters that are so bored with their life, and now they get to chase a giant around. Fantastic. I mean, one of them is even a dwarven masseuse. What are they smoking over there in Obsidian? I want to know. Number 5 is to do with the ship gameplay or ship mechanics. I find it very silly. It's kind of like the choose your own adventure text stuff they have for certain scenes, which are okay, but they sort of make it a phase thing where you take a turn and then the other guy takes a turn. You could go closer with your ship, or turn left, turn right, fire your cannons. That's just, I never got into it. It's just slow and silly. I don't know why they went that route. And then you have, on top of that, you have ship management, and they have things like food and water, but the annoying aspect on top of that is a morale system. So essentially, instead of, if you give your crew food and water, they hate you. It's like negative. Oh, you gave me water, -1 morale for every character every time you pay them. And this happens every day or every week or whatever I can't remember the measurement is. But that means you have to buy or make meals and find them like booze and rum and drinks that give pluses, or else if you get down to 0, they'll mutiny. So you're constantly feeding this annoying aspect of gameplay, which is just to get from point A to point B with a crew, and then you can get bounties, and it's just this annoying thing. And then when you go through that annoying turn-based combat, you can literally just say, listen, screw the cannons, screw the turn-based combat, I'm going to ram that damn ship, and then we're just going to go straight to real-time with pause gameplay. And you end up winning, because again, you become so powerful, I say about not even halfway through the game. So it's this bloated form of silly gameplay that is annoying. It slows the game down, and it's just not even, if it was cut out entirely, I think I'd be very happy. And number 6, the actual real-time with pause gameplay and the balances within that. Now, previously I said this is probably the best real-time with pause version of gameplay, and that's true, but because it's real-time with pause, there's lots of moving parts. And the issue is, how do you balance all of those elements? And it's like as if it's so refined and there's so much going on, it's almost too much going on. And there's so many controls and aspects to, like, say, the difficulty level, that before the game even starts, you have to choose whether or not your encounters scale with you. And if you have to choose that, that means the game is not linear enough to properly accommodate the gamer to challenge levels. So they say, hey, do you want all your encounters to scale? So wherever you go and wherever you navigate to, you'll have a difficult problem or a bunch of enemies to fight that are on your level. So that's one sign of a problem I noticed. Because after a certain point, as I said, enemies just, there's no problem. Like in my case, they explode. It's kind of like I was a monk character and I was just punching things. And okay, this is kind of a fun analogy I was talking to a friend about. Imagine you're playing League of Legends, you're Lee Sin, and as the monk character in Pillars of Eternity 2, you have 2 ultimates that you can cast at any time. There's a very slow cooldown. You have a passive stun, and then you have Mass Effect 2's Miranda's slam power, where you spin kick a giant into the air and he slams to the ground. So the majority of your abilities are knockback crowd controls. You're basically a DPS tank. And then you get a Vanguard charge that hits anything it goes through. So you're basically teleporting, stunning, and destroying things. And that's one unit. And that's not even through halfway of the game. You become so unstoppable. This is playing as a pure monk class, so I haven't even gotten to the higher levels, because if you're a pure monk or a pure anything class, you get the last 2 abilities, or the last 2 tiers of abilities. And I haven't even gotten that far yet, so I can imagine how ridiculously overpowered they are at that point. As well, with the gameplay, this is interesting. They cut the party size down to 5. And I can only assume it's because it's too easy, or not everyone can handle the number of units or effects on the screen at the same time, so cutting off one of those crazy AIs down would free up some resources. And I got a little bit annoyed because of that. Even though Tyranny had only 4, it's because the previous game had 6. So I'm really curious why they did that. And if one of the focuses of this game are the companions, and it's a party, and they're talking, and it's fully voiced, to take that away is odd. Now, whether they wanted to literally try and do what Dragon Age was doing with the 4-party system, okay, interesting, because again, the protagonist doesn't talk, aside from his voice set during combat. So that might have been closer to what they were doing. I honestly think it was just a balancing and resource issue. But nonetheless, it's sort of like, I have all these, like you literally have all these dudes to choose from. Why can't I have the 6 I expect? Anyway, I hope that was a better and more robust review or rambling talk about Pillars of Eternity 2, the problems of story and plot and characters and premise, and some of the great things about it. It is a quality product. I cannot deny it. But the problem, to me, an analogy is this. When you go to a steakhouse and you want a steak, and it's a beautiful steakhouse, fantastic service, prices are right, great drinks, but you end up getting a hamburger when you really wanted a steak.